Welcome to the WOVA Circle, real talk on fertility, wellness, and trying to conceive. I'm Gabie Peytchev, founder of WOVA Health and fertility educator. This podcast is your community space for navigating the path to parenthood with evidence-based insights, authentic conversations, and genuine support. I'm dedicated to being here with you through every part of your journey. Katie, who I'm meeting today, is a registered dietitian nutritionist with a background in digestive dysfunction, supportive supplementation, hormonal health, and bariatric surgery. Today, we're going to explore how the gut connects to hormones, energy, and overall health, and why it matters far beyond digestion. We'll also unpack common conditions like IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, thyroid imbalance, and endometriosis, and look at some of the newer conversations around things like GLP-1 medications and PCOS with the new name PMOS. The goal is to make sure that you get a sense of how all these symptoms connect in a way that feels practical and understandable. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you so much. I'm very, very excited to be here today. I love geeking out on all the things you mentioned.
Also, very excited to talk to you about all these things today.
Yeah.
When we talk about the gut microbiome, also oftentimes referred as microbiota or microflora, what are we
Mhm.
actually referring to? Explained in simple terms.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have a whole little environment within our gut that is filled with um, bacteria and other organisms. And so what they do and what their function does is quite a few different things. Like one, they help to digest our food and make it into a workable way that our body can use it. They also can help with hormone and hormone breakdown. And I know we'll get into that connection in a bit. They also help with creating signals called your neurotransmitters. So signals that work with the brain. That's why oftentimes we hear that the gut is called the second brain. It's because those two are connected. And so those little kind of bacteria, and I'll say other organisms, help to actually create those signals with the brain. And so those are kind of like main functions of that microbiome or microflora. You'll hear it, yes, many, many different terms. So,
Why does the health of the gut microbiome matter specifically when it comes to hormonal balance? You talked about the brain and gut connection, so moving to hormones, which is also connected to
my
the brain and the
gosh. Yeah, yeah. So, hormones, what I can say, hormones are messengers within the body. And so, when I'm kind of talking hormones, we can think of it as like a lot of different messengers, but specifically what I'll kind of do is say much more of like our sex hormones. Okay. So, think of our major players in our sex hormones like progesterone, estrogen, testosterone. And part of what, kind of, and I can say I'll do two parts with this. So, part of what that microbiome does, or why that gut is important in this whole process, is it is a detoxification highway. And in part, we have like I mentioned before, I was just like, hey, that those bacteria, they help with hormone breakdown and recycling. We have a part of our microbiome that is called the estrobolome. Fancy little term there. But those microbes or those bacteria, their focus is to be able to help break down estrogen and either partially utilize it to go back into that cycle or that cyclical nature that we need, or to help kind of take it out to the trash. And so we have that process that is really important in terms of our health of our hormones with our gut. That's kind of part one. And then you mentioned, hey, our gut and our brain and our hormones. And that other makeup too is that our hormones can be highly, highly affected by what's going on in our brain. So we have what we call our HPA axis. So that means our hypothalamus and our pituitary, and that's in our brain. And then our A, which is our adrenal gland. And our adrenal gland helps to not only produce some of our hormones. So I'm thinking the precursor or what turns into testosterone. It also influences estrogen, influences progesterone. And so that an A part, that adrenal part, is part of that picture. But its main feature is to help our stress response. So HPA is how we perceive stress, and that adrenal gland is what is the communication, not only cortisol, but also what's our communication to our hormones. And so it's a whole I'm trying to hopefully simplify this like complex system. And if I talk through hormones, as I say, think of them as messengers. So if we're looking at like, hey, we're perceiving stress and our body has both internal and external. So external is what we think about, work and life and those things. And then we also have internal. So that could be nutrients, like is our body getting too much or too little nutrients? Or are we getting too much or too little sleep? Or movement, too much or too little? That can be perceived by our body as a stress response. And then it starts that whole process of like brain to hormones. And if I bring it back to the gut, that gut part could also signal in here, oh, hey, we're not doing so well. And then that can start that response with our hormones too. And vice versa. I go, this part can also affect our gut as well.
We can
So,
see all of this can affect the menstrual cycle as well.
absolutely, absolutely. And so that's where, definitely if I, work with people or walk through kind of looking at this with someone, we want to take a look at like, hey, what's happening gut wise? Like I would not be a good practitioner if I didn't say like, hey, let's talk a little bit of how that looks. Because I'm trying to put the pieces together of like, if your menstrual cycle is off, then what are like let's get down and dirty a little with that of like why is that off? What's going on there? And what is the domino that is kind of making that off? And that could be in part of these other systems that we don't quite always think of. Usually when we think of menstrual cycle, we're just thinking of like, okay, our reproductive hormones or our reproductive organs. And we have some other things that could be happening within our body too that absolutely can affect.
What are
So,
some common symptoms to look out for in your menstrual cycle? What is not
sure.
normal, even though it's common?
Yeah, yeah. So, what I tend to look at in terms of menstrual cycle, right? Like I'll look at like length. Do we have kind of consistency in our cycle? Like, we always say 28 days, like oftentimes, but I'm kind of looking like, hey, is there consistency in yours? Whether that's 30 days and that might be where you live, but I'm looking for some consistency with that. I also am looking for like PMS symptoms. Like, how are you feeling? If we have really, really extreme or bad cramping for us that is making someone down for the count, that's telling me something about their hormonal system and potentially the communication with that. If someone has really heavy bleeding or a lot of clotting, that tells me a bit more about these systems. I also take a look too of like if someone has a mood shift that is marked, marked for them, let's say. So where they're like, after my period every month, I feel completely low and depressed and things like that. Like that's that's a symptom or a signal for me. Oh, we need to take a look at something a little bit further with it. So whenever I'm kind of walking through this or thinking through this with someone, is there might be things that you're exactly right, or like, hey, this has been my normal for a long time, but it really throws me off. Or it really like I know around my period, like I'm gonna get a headache. That's another one I'll mention. Like, I'm gonna that and then I'm out of commission for some days. And I'm like, oh gosh, okay, if that's really taking over your quality of life, then okay, we can look at this a little bit further to just start making some heads or tails around it so we have less impactful on someone's quality of life every month.
Makes sense. Yeah. You
Yeah.
often talk about hormonal resilience. What does that mean in practice?
Yeah, yeah. So I love the word resilience because, what we kind of want or, I look and practice is I want someone to feel confident that they know kind of where things are coming up for them. So, resilience not only is just like, hey, I kind of know, like, yep, my period is this amount of time, my second day is a little rocky. Like, and so that way they're more forthcoming or resilient within their life that they can, very much plan for that. Um, and not have something, again, the quality of life part, not have something take them down for the count for a while there. I think the other thing too with resiliency is that if things are thrown off in life, then it is not that it throws everything off, that they're like, okay, I know my period's going to be really bad and hormones, or my gosh, my stress response is going to make sure that like this period for the next 2 months is going to be really, really hard for me. And so you want resilience to be that, hey, things are can weather the storm a bit better because life will still happen. But if we're having stronger within our body, like that stronger response or that stronger pathway or, stronger understanding even, then our body can go, hey, I can weather the storm a little bit better. And so that's what I would say.
In your view, what are some of the key habits that you develop in your 20s that can shape hormone health term even in your 30s and 40s?
Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah, such an important question because right, we don't always think about that. Our future selves, we don't always think about that one. So I would look at like I think through some of my major kind of like my major players in all of this. So I definitely think through like nutrition. And so nutrients, if I really break it down, like some of my bigger, am I getting in my protein needs? Am I getting my, fiber needs? Am I getting in those bright colors that are going to help me with some of my like inflammation overall that can extend throughout? I also look at sleep and sleep cycle. That's actually really one of those things that, and like I talked about before, that internal stress, that sleep cycle can really ramp that up in terms of stress response, which then is a domino for later. I can also say, speaking about that stress response, having some really great stress relief habits that you can bring out that tool belt to utilize when your stress levels go up or down. And so, ongoing, I can say that's kind of key in your 40s and 50s of like making sure that stress level is something that can be handled. And then I think my other kind of maybe last two that I think through of like, 20s of what could be put in place is my other kind of major player here of like even fluid and what that looks like, where that is. and activity. So, do we have something that activity wise is going to help not only from a stress response, that's going to help bone, it's also going to help blood sugar, insulin resistance, all of these things that can be like really far reaching, just in terms of hormones. So, hormones can be a bit complicated there, but think
Yeah,
of
and
major players.
when you're in your 20s, oftentimes if there's nothing concerning, if there's no
Mhm.
symptoms, you usually don't really think about all these things. But
Right.
won't you say that symptoms sometimes develop later, even if there's something going on underneath, but it doesn't show up until later? Is that accurate?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Or it could be something that, with our 20s, our bodies are like, okay, no, bodies I think are amazing that they will adapt. They are all about like keeping someone moving and going. And so in our 20s, just because, right, our bodies are like, hey, I don't have as much use. I think of it like, anything that we have for a while, like over time slows down because of just like use and time. It's like our bodies in our 20s are like, okay, no problem. I got to make sure this person, okay, I can adjust, I can do things, I can keep them, energized. I can, they can get very little sleep, but we still got it. And so that like will not show up in our 20s in terms of ill effects because bodies are really like that's their goal. And over time, we have this chronic part. And so if chronically we've been using our body to adapt, over time, and let's say like as years go by, whether that is 30s, 40s, 50s, all of a sudden it's like, you know what? I've been doing this for a while and holy cow, I can't do it as well or as efficiently anymore. And so that's essentially kind of what our bodies are doing and looking at and why we can see that difference or see where something may pop up later and it's like, oh yeah, we've been, I just think if like I had to like run all the time over time, my legs would be like, oh man, I can't, I can't do this. And oh man, I'm getting tired. And so I have to think of that same way if we're taxing our bodies for some time, eventually they're just gonna go, I can't do this as well. It's as simple as that, or think of it simply like that.
I liked what you said that our bodies are so amazing and they adapt. So let's say we're in our 30s or 40s. We
Mhm.
are looking for ways to boost our fertility, improve our chances. Obviously, we cannot go back into our 20s and fix all the things we did that we probably should have not. But hey, everybody does a lot of different things. It's life. We learn, we grow. What can you do now that is impactful? It's not too late. You still have time to make changes. What changes would be the most impactful?
Yeah. So I probably would say the if I'm like, right, everything can help, but two most important, I can say one is, and let's say this is a 2.5 because I'm gonna put these two together, sleep and stress. That is like one that I can see is like, ooh, key, because your stress response, your cortisol rules your circadian rhythm. So we have kind of like a little bit of natural cortisol that's released every day. And that's what tells our body to wake up and then to go to sleep at night. And that's why I kind of put both of those a little bit together. So I often like, if I'm doing like, quick things, like I will tell everyone, look at the bookends of your day. Right? In the morning, kind of be like, okay, hey, this is how my day is going to go. If that is immediately waking up and being anxious and looking at your phone, that's how your day is going to go. And that's a lot. So we want to take a moment, 15 minutes, go, don't look at your phone. Go, okay, mantra, journal, whatever. Whew, this is how my day is going to go. End of the day, your other bookend, You're telling your body, hey, I'm relaxing to go to sleep because I need that rest and I need that reboot of my body. So look at that as like an hour of like, what are you doing? Pick three things. I'm having a cup of tea, I'm washing my face, and I'm brushing my teeth, and I'm reading a book. Stay off your electronics. That's kind of one major part. And then I think of the nutrient part. And the main thing that I look at is I want people to like focus on color, focus on bright color, because that tells us actually much more the nutrients that are going in there. And that also tells us what is more of our anti-inflammatories. And I know that word is thrown out a lot, but think of inflammation as this like puffy little coat that our body puts on to protect itself. And so we know with a puffy coat, we can't make a lot of moves, right? On anything, right? So we can't move our arm if we have a big puffy coat on. And our body's like, okay, if we want to fertility journey and get pregnant, if that puffy coat is on, our body's like, I really need to protect myself right now. And so I'm not going to throw a baby into that mix of protection. Something's going on. So the more things that we do, bright colors, the more anti-inflammatory that is, the less puffy coat we got.
Give me examples of bright color foods.
Yeah. So what I'm really mainly looking at is like, yes, your protein's important. Yes, we have a bit of our whole grains and our carbohydrates, but I always think if I'm looking at like my fruits and my vegetables, right? If I'm looking at a green, I want something that is deep green versus just a light green. I want something that is, okay, gosh, a red or a purple. So I'm always thinking like berries, like such powerhouses of anti-inflammatories. And so I'm thinking of like that richness versus that maybe like, okay, we just are like a light little red there or a light little purple there. I want like a richness, I think like purple cabbage that's really rich in comparison to maybe our other cabbage, which is like a light green. It doesn't have a purple to it. So I'm looking at something that gives me like a really rich or saturated or deeper color. I don't know. I think jewel tones. I always try to make something like light and easy to remember. And I'm like, jewel tones. That's what I'm looking for.
That reminds me, my husband goes to Costco and oftentimes he comes back home with lettuce and it's so light. And I keep saying, this is not the lettuce I want to eat. It should be a lot more green. And you're thinking of kale and spinach, and there's like a lot of red chard, green, all kinds of different varieties there. But
Yeah.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Talking stress, sleep. I was also thinking I felt all these things because when I'm under stress, I tend to not eat. I have friends who do the opposite. They actually end up eating more.
Sure.
When I don't sleep enough, which is I think normal, I start craving very sugary foods. So I can definitely see the connection there.
Yeah, yeah. So many things are just interconnected and far reaching. So sometimes, like, even when I'm working with someone, I'm kind of just like, okay, let's break this down and let's look at this focus. And I know as a dietitian, a lot of times people are like, okay, just food. But if I don't say something about sleep or we don't look at that, again, it's far reaching. So, like, it's like, okay, we also need to really look at like how all of these things integrate together so that we are just as people much more much more powerful. Yeah.
Agree. Agree. Okay, so let me tackle now a few modern trends. Let's talk about GLP-1 medications. What do you think about that, those type of medications, especially for people who are trying to conceive, men, women, anyone with ovaries or testes?
Yeah, so I think so I absolutely can say that they can be useful depending upon the person. Okay. So, they help with inflammation. They also help with blood sugar response, which can affect quality of egg and quality of sperm. So, depending on the person and what's going on in their overall picture, they can be useful. But you will want to work with someone that really knows all the ins and outs of that GLP-1, which type, how much, what that looks like. Because on the flip side, that does change in terms of like motility. So we think of microbiome changes and motility of like digestive tract. I'm also thinking through too, it switches as, hunger and fullness signals. So a lot of times then I have people who are like, oh, I didn't feel hungry, so I didn't eat. And then we're going to miss on key nutrients that could make that sperm and that egg. So that's why I say like it's one, I'm not against it, but like it takes someone to work with a professional that knows what they're doing in this area to really be able to navigate it in just a helpful way. Yeah.
May 12th, PCOS was renamed to PMOS. Let's talk about this. This is a hot topic now.
New
So,
hot topic. Yes.
as poly,
Literally, I was looking at this yesterday. That's why I'm so cracking up. Like,
yeah,
yep.
polyendocrine metabolic ovarian syndrome.
Uh-huh.
I love this name, but I'm not
Uh-huh.
an expert on PCOS or PMOS, and I'd really like to hear what you think about this name. Does it reflect really the true meaning of this condition, or is there something still missing?
Yeah, so I think it's a much better reflection of this condition because if you think of it before like polycystic ovary syndrome, right? And I'm just like, okay, if I'm really looking at that, I was just like, not everyone produces cyst. Like, and it is a far-reaching metabolic, and I know that term usually people think of metabolism and they think of weight. Metabolic is literally how someone's body like breaks things down, utilizes it, and messages throughout the body. So it's much more of like this like kind of like background signaling of what is happening within tissues, within certain cells. I could go in the weeds on this, but it's complicated, so I'm not. But I think PMOS is really looking at endocrine function. So I kind of break that down of like what's going on endocrine wise, that is much more of your signals of like how your body is utilizing fuel, blood sugar, etc. And that leads into metabolic or metabolism. So it's a much more, I would say, layered and better meaning for this than just do you have cyst or not cyst, and are there several? Like, because some people have this condition, but that the cyst part isn't true for them. So
Yeah,
I like it better.
yeah. Can we tackle a few conditions? IBS, thyroid, and endometriosis, very common. Let's start with IBS, irritable bowel syndromes. Can you talk about this? Symptoms, things to look out for that is really alarming and we need to pay attention to.
Yeah, so IBS, IBS is kind of a blanket for kind of a lot of, let's say, part of this condition. So typically it's much more brain kind of gut related is what they kind of tend to see. And vice versa. So there's usually like an anxiety or depression component to it, like, oh, I get anxious, and then, I have something. So typically it's diarrhea, constipation, or sometimes it's mixed. So that's what I tend to look at when someone has IBS. What you think symptom wise is you kind of think of this quick change in bowel movement and this kind of change in motility in someone's digestive tract. It also sometimes can come along with pain. It also can sometimes come along with bloating. IBS like covers a lot of areas, and so it's a really common one. But what I also want to look at is I also would want to look at microbiome too, because sometimes that signaling can help or hinder that condition. So,
So
there's some avenues.
it's not just a
Yeah,
digestive, but definitely digestion has a lot to do with it.
a
And
lot to do
yeah,
with it. Yeah.
stress.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I say it's an important one of
Yeah.
looking at like gut brain, let's say.
Is
Yeah.
there a test that you can do to see if you have IBS?
Not really. There's not like an IBS test. They typically are going by symptoms and almost like a rule out. Like it's a rule out, like it's not this other digestive condition. It's not this digestive condition. It's not this digestive condition. So it's IBS. So it's much more, that's why I say like it is very much like a overarching kind of term and overarching diagnosis because it's, you eliminate other things and then it falls into that category. But can be a lot more to it versus just you don't have this. So
Yeah.
that's why I'm always like, oh, there's some things we can break down around it.
And I assume in this case, there's really no one treatment. It's a very individualized approach.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Because I mentioned the gut-brain axis, but like also if I'm looking at microbiome, then I might want to think through that. It depends if someone's more constipated, diarrhea, or mixed. So there's not one approach to it because you're seeing what are all the symptoms that someone has with it.
Moving to thyroid health,
Mhm.
why is thyroid imbalance sometimes missed or even under-recognized in practice, even when symptoms can be present?
Yeah, so what I think is that like sometimes people can have like what they call subclinical, thyroid issues. So the main kind of test that's typically utilized or looked at is TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone, which that one doesn't always show low level of, and just think thyroid is a gland and we have hormones, again, messengers. Okay. So, what I can say is that, we don't always see when it's subclinical. I think of it kind of just think of that term as like low key. So, when we have something, it's not like it's, oh my gosh, okay, it's clear as day. But low key, some of those messengers are off. And so that's why oftentimes like that's missed because it's not where it's much more prominent or glaring of a symptom even for people, or that their symptoms are kind of like, okay, fatigue, or it could be related to other things. So I think that's why it's kind of missed oftentimes. And you do need to kind of ask some questions and get in the weeds and look a little bit further at some of the like lower key hormone pathways that isn't always done in day to day unless you request it.
So,
So
not just testing for TSH, but also antibodies. There's other markers that you can test for that would help.
markers, T3, T4, reverse T3, antibodies. Like there's a lot that you can kind of take a look at that would be much more comprehensive. So um yeah, and that's not always done in everyday practice.
My last question is around endometriosis because it's really often, quite often seen in people struggling to conceive. And
Mhm.
I hear from experts also that usually over 50% of unexplained infertility is oftentimes due to endometriosis, which is a different condition. So it's also often, it's hard to detect. It can take years and years, 7, 10 years. There is recently a new blood test came out, endome test. What do you think about this test? Do you really think that it's going to give us a lot more information earlier on?
No, I think it's kind of early to see, to be honest with you. Like, because I think with endometriosis, you're exactly right. It's like there's not a typically like a test for it. There hasn't been a test for it. So you go by symptoms, and then it's almost like you do a procedure to see if there's endometrial tissue. And that's when you get diagnosed. And, all of that time, you have that like pain and, just like other discrepancies. And so it makes it a really impactful condition, but one that is really, really hard to give that, like, yes, exactly this and that. And, I can say on the front of like, I definitely work with people who have endometriosis and or endomyosis, and so I mean, there's things that we can do to actually like improve that pathway and improve symptoms for sure. There are stuff that we can do besides, kind of tissue, or surgery if that's not warranted or where someone really wants to go at that time. Um, I will say, like, I'm looking forward to seeing, like, as testing gets more involved, that's where I think I could give a better opinion. Right now, I feel like it's just a little bit too early, and I haven't seen like
Yeah.
enough to be like, oh yeah, no, this is it. This is the one, Because I'm like, it's such a like a complicated condition that like oftentimes also brings the gut health part to it too. So yeah, no, I think, I kind of that's why I love this field too, is because we're all trying to move forward and really advocating to move things forward. And so I'm always excited to see with the newness of like, ooh, we got something new. Let's see what's happening. We could have something that's really happening. And so I hope for it too. Yeah.
So thank you so much, Katie. This was an
Yeah.
amazing conversation.
Yeah,
I
no.
truly enjoyed it.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. As I said, I was like, oh, I can geek out on these things all day. But it can be complicated, but I really try and hope to simplify it so it doesn't feel so overwhelming. Because understanding your body and what's going on makes it so much easier to then go forward and go, oh, I can do this about that, or now I get what's going on, so that you can also be proactive within your health too. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I appreciate it as well.